The Esmeralda was dropped into El Morro Bay in the spring of 1948, built by Egbert Ed Hudson, called Big Ed by his friends. This is a very tough and durable boat. It was designed to outrun Grand Canyon. The plans for the boat were reviewed by naval architect William Garden after much study by Big Ed. The first attempt to outrun the Esmeralda was in 1948. At that time, the boat was powered by a 4-cylinder gray marine 75 horsepower marine engine, and it didn't do very well. It was underpowered. So in the winter of 48-49, Hudson swapped out the engine to a flathead 6-cylinder gray marine engine, the 125 horsepower unit. In 1949, this boat was the first motorboat to downrun the entire Colorado River from Lee's Ferry to Lake Mead. One of the things about Esmeralda II is its bow, the front of the boat, is what's called a spoonbill front. It's not a real pointed front, so the water had a tendency to whip up over the front of the boat and head back toward the passengers. And that's why this extra bit of canvassing to keep the river runners dry, even then, it had a problem because it was still wet here in the passenger's compartment and the driver's seat. This was a wet boat, and it was a wet ride. One of the things Ed Hudson wanted to do was to protect the propeller and the rudder as much as he could. In order to do that, the bottom of the boat is an inverted V. That gives the propeller and the rudder just a little more protection. What it also did to the boat when the boat was cruising in the river is the boat had a tendency to do this funny jump thing, and it was kind of uncomfortable to ride in. This is the inline flathead 6 gray marine of the Esmeralda II. In 1950, the Esmeralda wasn't running so good below Phantom Ranch, and just below today's Crystal Rapid, below Tuna Rapid, the river makes a hard bend, and the Esmeralda ended up in that eddy, and Hudson abandoned the boat. There were 2 boats on the 1950 river trip, and Margaret Marston was watching their progress on the rim. She knew something was wrong, so she chartered a tour helicopter and flew in. She found her husband, Doc Marston, and his boat at Tapeats Creek, heading to Havasu Canyon to hike to the village of Supai. Doc told her and the pilot where to find Big Ed Hudson, and the rescue was made. Doc then piloted his stock 19-foot-long Chris Craft racing runabout downriver, including running Lava Falls Rapid on his way out of the canyon. What happened to the boat is that this motor has a gasket between the cylinder head and the engine below. And that gasket blew out between a couple of the cylinders. A month after Hudson abandoned the boat, the next river trip came along and found this boat dry docked at Forester Rapid. It was just sitting as pleasant as can be on a rock pile. And they started it, and it ran rough, but it ran. So that river trip dragged it to the water, took it to camp, and that night they pulled off the cylinder head, found the broken gasket, fixed it, put it all back together. And they motored it out of Grand Canyon. By that time, Big Ed Hudson had given the boat to the National Park Service, and eventually, with a little bit of legal work, the boat is now in the museum collection, having come to the park in the fall of 1950. One of the really interesting things about the Esmeralda, to make things better, if they saw things that weren't working, like the engine was underpowered, Well, it got a new engine. If this boat was going to run in 1951, Otis Marston was going to make sure that this horn didn't work. While other boats had license plates on them for fun, the Esmeralda II had a license plate for real, issued by the U.S. Department of Interior, National Park Service, 1948, allowed this boat to operate on Lake Mead. Its intended purpose was to uprun the Grand Canyon, and to do that, you had to boat through Lake Mead into the far western end of Grand Canyon before you started hitting the big rapids. There wasn't much to it to make it run. This lever here was to engage the clutch. That would put the engine to the propeller. This lever here was the throttle. And this was the steering wheel connected by cables to the rudder in the back.